Thanks, Sam. So yeah, I'm going to sort of blur the boundaries slightly of whether we're talking about tutoring or whether we're talking about PhD supervision. But if you just keep in your mind that that's worth blurring because it's the same academic staff who are delivering on those roles. So I'm thinking about how we integrate development for those staff, how we integrate sort of supporting them with a tutoring role, with their supervision role, and really when it boils down to it, how are we thinking about staff-student relationships and building quality into those relationships and quality into those conversations, rather than saying, here's a set of rules for tutoring, here's a set of rules for supervision. So my role is at the University of Sheffield is that I work on researcher development, academic development, supervisory development in the main. And I do that by designing mentoring and coaching programs, either for early career researchers, for doctoral students, for academic staff. So what I teach is a very specific professional educational skill set, mentoring skills, coaching skills, used within that educational context, and thinking about now how they might be applied in different ways. Through those programs, I meet a lot of people who have got stuck somehow. There might be early career researchers, precarious job roles, not knowing what to do next. It might be doctoral students, a big bulk of my work is doctoral students who've got completely stuck with thesis writing, are making no progress, are feeling very down, very anxious, very depressed, very stressed about their thesis writing. And then I meet their supervisors as well, who want to help. They're very diligent. They want to do a good job. They want to be there. They want to be supportive. But actually, what do you do? What can I say in the moment that makes a difference for this person? So, thinking about that quality of conversation. I did a piece of work that's just been published by the Leadership Foundation for Higher Education, which was all about those relationships between doctoral students and supervisors, how trust is built, how it's eroded, what leads to a breaking of trust, and what difference trust in a supervision relationships makes to the visibility of that student to the supervisor. This sort of lack of trust leading to a hiding behaviour, hiding themselves, hiding their work, not appearing to be productive in those senses, and really mapping where trust is important and what the tensions are. So that's now just been published as of last week if you want to pick that up. But I'm not going to give you sort of very critical or academic rundown of what's in that report. I've actually brought some ideas on trust and trust building today that I think it would be useful, especially in this before lunch slot, for you to actually get involved and talk about and start thinking about trust and how that's built, what that looks like for you, how you know you trust someone, how you experience trust, and thinking when you go back and you get back about your real lives, how you might help other people understand and build trust with their students. The synergy really is that academic staff are time poor, and that we want to integrate any kind of learning and development or workshops or support or initiatives or cultures that we're building within our different institutions and our different contexts. Integrate those together. So it's one skill set that serves people in a variety of ways. And if you're interested in some data that I've collected which shows how mentoring and coaching skills are applied in different contexts, please do let me know and I'll point you to those case studies. We've heard all this earlier, so I'm not going to review all the literature that Emma and Sam presented in the opening set this morning, but just really to boil that down to this idea that transitions are hard, and they're harder for some groups than other groups. Talking about those transitions, talking about your attainment, talking about your achievement, talking about what you struggle with, helps with those transitions. But the people who you talk to need the skills to be able to support you appropriately through quality of conversation. And back to this statement here, which is what I'm keeping in my head when I think about how we can support tutoring and develop tutors, is that those quality relationships and quality conversations are central. And what Sam and Emma showed us before is staff kind of coming around to this realisation that, yes, we know this, we know we can be agents for change, but are unsure what that looks like and unsure how to position themselves to do that work in particular. And this is a quote from Emma and Sam's data from Sheffield. This is a tutor who said, actually, I think the single most important thing is that you develop a relationship where they feel able to come and see you if they have any problems. So although classically you're not the expert counsellor, you are a first port of call, and you should develop a good enough rapport with them for them to feel comfortable. And when I read this, I go, yes, mentoring and coaching, that's what it flags to me because that's where I work. Development of rapport, building of a solid foundation, building trust in that relationship. Okay, but how? And what we don't often get is people saying, and the way I do it is this. So it's, articulating that, collecting case data on that, and really demonstrating how I build trust, how I build that relationship, how I demonstrate to somebody that I'm trustworthy is something else altogether. And I think that there's worries and insecurities that flag to me trust all the time that come through from the tutees. So these are personal tutees, again, from Sam and Emma's RAR data. Very proactive in trying to get contact. Just always seemed like he was an academic. He was too smart to help an undergraduate student. And what I read from this is that somebody is looking at somebody else and they're saying, they're not like me. They're not like me. And that predictability, feeling somebody's like you, is a component of trust. You can't really go to them because, for example, going to ask me if, for me, if I was going to go after first year, he's seen my face only once, he doesn't know barely how I look. He's got, he doesn't know anything about me. And again, this familiarity, predictability is a component of trust. So this is what I read when I read through these data. If we compare that to the kinds of things that doctoral students are telling me about why they do or don't go and see their supervisor, why they do or don't declare when they've got difficulties, this is kind of an amalgamated quote, really, but it's what I hear time and time again when somebody phones me and says, I've got a problem, I need some help. I'm terrified of being asked how it's going. I've got no idea how any of this works. I'm lost, and it's scary, so I avoid contact. The hiding behaviour when there's trust lacking in a relationship. And I can really relate to that because I always joke that I used to know the shape of my PhD supervisor through frosted glass. And I would see them come in and I go, oh no. And I go the other way because they're going to ask me something I don't know. I'm going to feel embarrassed. I'm going to feel vulnerable. I'm going to feel insecure. And so I would rather avoid that and I walk away. Unspoken rules come into that. Blurred boundaries. What am I here to do? What can I call on my supervisor or tutor for? What are they here? Are they here just for a problem? As you mentioned before, problem-based seeking of support is something that I think we can really productively do something. You know what, your tutor and your supervisor, they're not for problems, they're for planning. Let's do something proactive around tutoring. Unclear what the end goals of something might be. What am I supposed to get out of tutoring? What's it for? And then this idea of not being very good at self-management or study management, and how can we support that with good relationships? When we talk to the academic staff as well, they say very similar things, but from the opposite perspective. It's not just easy for them to deliver what the student wants or what the students need. And again, it's an amalgamated quote from what I hear when a staff member will phone me and say, I've lost a student, which is normally how a conversation starts. My students stop responding. I can't find them, they're not replying to emails. So I've tried hands-on and I've tried hands-off, so two strategies here. I don't know what they need, and now they've stopped responding to emails. So it's, sort of doing the what works for me or the opposite of that and thinking, actually, what can I do? And they describe this chase-quarry effect where they're worried about a student, so they chase them down, and the more that student's chased, the more they want to run and hide, and we get into a pattern of behaviour that isn't productive to anybody. I've just tried what works for me. I think it's very honest but very important for staff to have said to me often that actually silence is golden. I want the time, I'm really pushed. I don't have enough time to do things. So if tutees aren't coming or my supervisees aren't coming, that's kind of good for me because I can get something else done in that time. And also this idea that I don't know either. They're coming with questions that I don't know the answer to, and that's very difficult. So we've got to find out together. Thinking about all of this. To me, this flags all the time as a function of trust and as a matter of trust. I'm here to sort of persuade you today, really, that thinking about trust and trust building is important. Because if trust is defined as willingness to accept uncertainty and go and be visibly vulnerable in the face of that insecurity, so actually turn up and go, hey, there's something I don't know. There's something I'm stuck with, something's gone wrong, I feel vulnerable, but I'm willing to share that with you. I think if we can work on promoting or supporting people's willingness to do that, we might get people at least talking, at least in the room together, at least sharing what's going on for them. And so I asked, I'm sort of interrogating data at the minute on tutoring. We've got preliminary data on tutoring, but mostly on supervision. I asked, where does trust come from, and through which behaviours, demonstrable behaviours that the other person can see, is trust built or eroded or broken? I'm going to give you the whole rundown of that. But what I have got today, and I'll very sort of quickly read through these, and I'm going to give you 5 or 10 minutes just to talk to the person next to you and say, does this ring true for you? for undergraduate students, for what you know of tutoring, do you think this applies in that kind of relationship? When I talked to the students, they said, actually, it's an ongoing process over time, over every conversation. It's not a case of, you get to a point where you trust someone and then that's it. It's very slow to build and it's quite quick to destroy. And what students and staff said, actually, once you've broken trust, you don't really ever get it back. So I think that's something we need to think about. That can be built or eroded in meetings when people are actually, communicating with each other. They're saying, yes, you do this, I do this, and off we go. But also between those meetings, between formal tutoring meetings, because students observe what staff, if you're in a classroom situation and you see that member of staff attack someone else or do something that you feel lacks integrity or not deliver on something that they said they would do, trust can be broken without that direct conversation. People said, actually, you've got to demonstrate you're trustworthy, not just say you are, and giving examples of saying, someone said, you can come to me and you can tell me anything, but then I've seen them gossip behind someone else's back about what was said to them. So, you have to really demonstrate that. You can't just tell me you're trustworthy and I don't believe it. Students said that being trusted to do pieces of work, being trusted to know about themselves and to make their own decisions, built trust with their supervisor or with their tutor. He said, just someone saying to me, well, you've got options A, B, and C, but I'm going to let you decide what's best for you, is the kind of thing that would build trust in a relationship. And this idea of sort of ask, don't tell, which I think is really important when we've got access to students' achievements, exam grades, metrics, to ask somebody, how did that go? What did you get on that exam? How did that assignment go for you? And let the student tell you is way more conducive to trust building than when a student walks in and sits down and you say, so I looked up and you got 63 on this. That sort of checking and snooping was something that eroded trust. And that's how students do describe it, that they've been checked on or snooped on or betrayed in that way. Obviously, feedback practices matter very greatly in many ways, trying to get feedback. And this idea of, again, ask, don't tell. What do you think you could have done better rather than this is what you could have done better? And again, we're coming back to that coaching idea of asking and not telling. Valuing each other just as people, person to person, before student to supervisor or student to tutor. Being fair, demonstrating openness, reliability, following through on promises. And then disclosure the other way and saying, actually, yep, I get what you mean. I've experienced this. And for the staff to disclose will build trust and showing some empathy for that student as well. Observing confidentiality, very key one. It's a very easy thing to think of when we think about trust breaking. But also observing role boundaries, not using things like calling witness, which it was a very clear example was given to me of a student had come into a situation, talked about it to their supervisor, and then that supervisor had emailed someone else in the department with a retelling of that story, copied the student in, so obviously hadn't thought that they were doing anything wrong, but written at the top, this is that student I was telling you about, so really sort of, calling witness to say to other people's business and opening up and breaking those confidentialities or gossiping in that way. So I'm just going to give you, 5-10 minutes or so, however long you think you need, to look at these, pick maybe one or two that are important to you and turn to a partner and say, have you seen this? Is this something you could think about? Is this something you could take action towards maybe? If I could bring us back together, then please. Thank you very much for the energy and the effort that you put into that discussion. So would you just give me a little wave if you think that perhaps this is relevant to tutoring? Okay. I just want to check, in a room of actual people who know about this, that we've not just missed the mark and I'm randomly spouting something. Okay, so some things to think about there. And I've put here, and again, as Sam said at the beginning, this is not about giving you a didactic list of things to do, but some things to think about that you might interpret within your own context in your own institutions. What might support this? What might support trust building? What might support those kinds of things that we saw on that last slide not to happen? I'm all for this because I work in this area and it's my favourite thing. I love coaching and mentoring. I want everyone to have the benefit of that skill set within their institution. Coaching is it's a learner-centred activity. It's something that's about the student. They come to you with what they want to talk about. It involves very clear boundary setting and creating sort of alliances and alignment and agreeing what we're going to work on. So I think that clarity of the role and the clarity of what we're here to do and why and how that might work are part of that skill set. Listening first, listening before, talking, asking before telling, kind of mantras that go along with coaching. Empathy, placing the student as the expert in their own life and facilitating them to make their own decisions. And in that way, building them as problem solvers rather than using tutoring to solve their problem. It's not, we don't want sort of students walking in, I have a problem, oh, here's the answer to that. But actually using that space to help someone fix their own problem. So next time they feel like they can approach that and solve a problem. And this idea of weaving in as well, trust awareness, asking staff perhaps, who do they trust? How do they know they trust that person? What would they trust them with? What types of trust? What kind of person tends to trust what other kind of person in what situations? How do we show or demonstrate that we're trustworthy? And is some of the trust that we have for other people assumed? And I'm sure you'll recognise the stories of people saying, well, I came to this university to do my degree or PhD and I thought it would be fine because if they're not trustworthy, why would they let them work here? And the sort of assumption that because somebody works in a prestigious organisation, they will be trustworthy, that someone else has screened or checked that. And how do we convert that assumed trust to real professional trust between two people? So just in the last sort of 5 minutes or so, I would like you just to, in your head now for just a couple of minutes, think of a colleague that you trust at work. It can be anyone, you're not going to have to say this out loud, it's just a reflection for you. Think of someone you trust. And what your first thoughts now about how you came to trust them. How did you know they were trustworthy? What did they do? What did they say? How did they greet you? What kind of space did they make for you? How did they communicate? And if you're honest, just with yourself in your head, are there caveats to that trust? Are there things you wouldn't trust them with? Are there things you know they won't be able to do? Are there things you wouldn't say to them or wouldn't give to them to do? And do they trust you? And how do you know? How do you know if someone trusts you? If you say, I go around and I've done X and Y and Z at work, so people obviously would trust me, how do you know if they do or not? Just some thoughts and reflections that we could also help other people do, help them think about these kinds of things when they're thinking about their tutoring relationships, their supervision relationships. How do we know we've got trust? Because trust is cited all over the place as being important to working relationships, but we hardly ever crystallise that down to what it looks like and what we do. And I'm going to leave you with this. And probably in the last 5 minutes or so, again, conversation with a partner. That person that you thought of, please don't name them, please keep their details confidential, but just talk theoretically to a partner about these areas of trust. Do you feel that colleague is competent? Do you feel they feel you're competent? Are they qualified? Do they demonstrate the skills needed to succeed? Are they benevolent? Do they engage with you in an open way? Are they inclusive? Do they make sure that you're taken care of? Do they demonstrate empathy, kindness, gratitude, good collegiality? Do they have integrity? Integrity of role, not crossing boundaries, staying true to what they've said they do and what they're here to do? Do they demonstrate honesty? Can they hold their hands up and say, that's my fault? Do they give credit where it's due? And are they predictable? And I think this is a really, really key box that we can have a lot of impact in. Do they make the reasons for their actions, decisions? Do they make them clear? Do we know why we're here and what we're here to do? Do they give consistent messages about what success looks like, what you need to do to succeed or to progress, what their role is and what the boundaries to that role are? So 4 minutes or so left now. Just have a think about these concepts and the person who will remain anonymous that you're thinking of and what pops out from that matrix for you that might be useful to you in your tutoring work. Okay. I would just like to end with one final thought really about trust. and trust at work, professional trust, is that we don't all have to be all things to all people. It's perfectly possible to have a good working relationship with somebody and you think, you know what, I'm not going to get that from them. So I choose what I tell them. I choose how I manage that relationship with them. I think it's fine. I'm not promoting this idea we have to make everybody super amazing and competent in all of these boxes. But I do think it's a worthwhile reflection when we're thinking about working relationships, quality of conversation, partnerships with students that really enhance their learning, to think about how we come across in these boxes to people who are asking to place trust in us and trust us with details about themselves that can be quite personal, quite private, and quite emotional often. So I just offer this in case it's useful to you in what you do to think about trust and to think about how you develop others to have trust. I'm going to leave it there, which I think leaves us time for no questions, but obviously I'm around the whole time today, and you've got my email address if you should want to ask me anything. So thank you very much. Cheers.